Woo! Get some!
Welcome to TYT. I'm your host, Anna Kasparian, on this lovely spring day. It is hot in LA, at least in the San Fernando Valley, not so much in the area our studio is located in, but nonetheless, super happy to be here with you all today. I'm excited for the deep dive I'm about to do because no one in really corporate media or left-wing media has been talking about this issue having to do with new fees associated with mortgages. It's gonna have a big impact on people who have good credit, believe it or not. So we're gonna talk about that, do a deep dive. Later in the show, we will also talk about indigenous leaders across the globe who are very much concerned with how the West is responding to the climate emergency. They feel that the West solutions to the climate emergency is actually a detriment to these indigenous communities. And I think it's important to give them a voice and talk about what their concerns are. We're also gonna discuss how private equity has led to the shutdown of multiple hospitals, not just across the country, but in particular in states like Pennsylvania. So we'll talk about that and the lack of really any regulations to prevent the private equity greed and destroying the much needed hospitals in these communities. As always, just want to encourage you guys to like and share the stream. The show is obviously very different on Wednesdays. There's all sorts of timely Trump-related news, headline news. We're gonna do basically none of that in the first hour. But don't worry, John Heiderola will be joining me in the second hour to talk about some of that stuff. tyt.com/join to become a member to help support the work we do. And like and share the stream, as I said already, to help support the show. All right, without further ado, let's get to our deep dive of the day.
New federal rule is going to make it more expensive to buy a home, not because you make more money, but simply if you have good credit. Comes at a time when mortgage rates are already above 6%.
Yeah, you just heard that correctly. Believe it or not, a new rule that was decided unilaterally by the Biden administration penalizes homebuyers who have higher credit scores and pay larger down payments. The stated objective is allegedly equity in the housing market by charging less risky borrowers higher fees that would theoretically subsidize riskier borrowers who have lower credit scores and smaller down payments. The new policy has to do with something known as loan level price adjustments, or LLPAs, which are imposed by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, the two entities that guarantee the vast majority of new mortgages. LLPAs are fees that get tacked onto mortgages, and they vary among borrowers. Traditionally, the fees are calculated based on credit scores and the size of the borrower's down payment. But Biden is changing all of that.
Understand what's going on, you need to familiarize yourself with the term called loan level price adjustments. These were introduced 15 years ago after the mortgage crisis to compensate for the risks of lending money. Basically, this allowed lenders to charge fees based on the likelihood that someone was not going to pay back their loan. Generally, the lower the credit score, the higher the risk the borrower is, and the higher the score, the lower the risk. Seems common sense, right? Well, in January of this year, new changes were put in place that would level the playing field between good credit and bad credit. And starting May 1st, the biggest benefits would go to those with bad credit. Of course, this inevitably winds up getting spun around as Biden redistributing high-risk loan costs to homeowners with good credit, which is kinda true, but it's not the entire picture. Just to show you a before and after, if you have a 640 credit score and put 25% down, you'd previously have to pay a fee of 2.75%. Now that same borrower will only have to pay a 1.5% fee. On the other hand, if you have a 750 credit score and put 25% down, you used to be charged a 0.25% fee, and now you're gonna have to pay a 0.375% fee unless your credit score is above 780, in which case everything stays the same.
Yeah, that sounds like a regressive tax that punishes people with good credit, and I just don't get it. So to recap, under the old traditional lending model, homebuyers with high credit scores and larger down payments paid less in fees because someone with good credit is less likely to default on their mortgage. Higher down payments also translate to lower monthly mortgage payments, which reduces the monthly housing costs for the borrower. That also makes it less likely that the borrower will default on the loan. On the other end, borrowers with lower credit ratings and smaller down payments pay higher fees or paid higher fees because they're riskier to lend to. They have a higher likelihood of defaulting on the loan, and lenders charge those higher fees to those borrowers to essentially hedge their bet. But under Biden's new rules, that all changes. And I think it's critical to give you some specific examples of just how costly this can be for those with good credit. Before we get to that, I'll start with the theoretical good news for people who could benefit from this. According to Mortgage News Daily, the effective penalty for having a credit score under 680 is now smaller than it was. If you have a score of, let's say, 659 and are borrowing 75% of the home's value, you'll pay a fee equal to 1.5% of the loan balance, whereas you'd pay no fee if you had a 780 plus credit score. Before these changes, you would have paid a 2.75% fee. All right, well, let's give you another example. Let's say on a $300,000 home loan, that savings in fees would amount to nearly $4,000, pretty good. But that lower fee is made possible because borrowers with scores ranging from 680 to 780 will see a spike in their mortgage costs. In fact, applicants who saved for a 15 to 20% down payment will experience the biggest increase in fees. Just take a look at this chart to see how things have changed under the new Biden rules, okay? So the green and yellow cells represent the borrowers who will see a decrease in their fees. And just notice how the greenest cells are shown in areas where the buyer has a lower credit score and of course a smaller down payment. Orange and red cells represent where mortgages will be more expensive due to increased fees, meaning those with higher credit scores and bigger down payments. For example, a buyer with a 620 FICO credit score and a 5% down payment gets a 1.75% fee discount, and that's pretty significant. It's a significant decrease from the old fee rate of 3.5% for that bracket. But again, that comes at a price. A home buyer with a 740 FICO score and a 15 to 20% down payment will face a 1% surcharge compared to the old fee of just 0.250%. Now, the fees can be front-loaded as a lump sum that's included in the closing costs, or the borrower can bake the fees into their monthly mortgage payment throughout the lifetime of their loan. And if you think the fees are negligible, you'd be mistaken. According to David Stevens, who served as Obama's Federal Housing Administration Commissioner, the costs are freaking significant. On the low end, monthly payments will rise by about $40 if the borrower with good credit is purchasing a $400,000 home at a 6% interest rate. By the way, interest rates are above 6% at this point. We're just giving you the 6% interest rate for example's sake. Now, over the lifetime of that loan, the additional cost to subsidize Americans with bad credit amounts to $14,400 for the borrower. Again, that's on the low end of the fee increases. If you live in a big city like Los Angeles, you'd be hard pressed to find a home at $400,000 or even below $750,000. So you'd obviously pay more than $40 a month in fees. So for example, on an $800,000 home, the borrower with good credit would pay nearly $30,000 in additional fees throughout the lifetime of that 30-year fixed mortgage. Look, there are several issues with this new Biden rule. For one, it's being marketed as some sort of tax the rich policy that makes it seem like the new system redistributes wealth from fabulously wealthy tax dodgers in order to make home buying within reach for more Americans. But those with credit scores above 780, for some reason, won't be charged additional fees. And do the fee decreases for those with bad credit make all the difference in making housing more affordable? The answer to that is no.
As you can see, borrowers in the middle wind up paying 0.75% more than before, while borrowers in the lowest credit tiers see a marginal savings. Now, don't get the wrong idea, because people with bad credit still end up paying more in fees than people with good credit, but people with good credit now get less benefit than they did before, and people with bad credit end up seeing a slight savings. It's kind of like, in really simple terms, if the house is $100, a person with good credit would pay $1 instead of paying 25 cents, and a person with bad credit would pay $2.85 instead of paying $3.25.
Honestly, this just looks like the Biden administration is doing the banking industry a solid by greenlighting more fees under this facade of housing affordability. Even David Stevens, again, the guy who worked for the Obama administration, thinks this is a bad idea and argues that it's unlikely to work in helping people afford homes.
Scott Bolden's here, former chair of the Democratic Party in DC. I get the idea of the campaign promise to get the rich to pay their fair share. But aren't there going to be a lot of folks in the middle class who have just been responsible and have good credit who are going to also be caught up in this?
Yeah, it's like a penalty for good credit and putting a high down payment.
If you want to make it income tested, fine. How are you making it credit score tested? I just don't get it.
By the way, Stevens also says that this confusing approach won't work, and more importantly, couldn't come at a worse time for an industry struggling to get back on its feet after these past 12 months. To do this at the onset of the spring market is almost offensive to the market, consumers, and lenders. He's right. For one, the credit rating metric being used to calculate new fees say little about the income or wealth of those borrowers getting hit hardest by the changes. Look, having a higher credit score doesn't mean that someone's rich. It just means that they managed to pay their bills on time. It also means that they have a decent debt to credit ratio, meaning that their available credit is greater than their outstanding financial liabilities. A borrower with good credit could be a teacher making $60,000 a year who pays off their credit card in full each month. Does that person really need to pay higher mortgage fees to subsidize riskier borrowers? Income isn't even factored into credit scores. As John Yulsheimer, who used to work for FICO and Equifax, notes, income isn't considered in credit scoring systems. Wow, really? So our wages and salaries aren't weighed in at all? Income isn't even on your credit reports, so it cannot be considered in credit scores because credit scores only consider what's on your credit reports. In fact, no wealth metrics are factored into your credit scores. So this really isn't about redistributing wealth from billionaires to the poor. This actually pits working Americans against one another and deepens resentment and division. I think we've had enough of that. By the way, Stevens was also subtly touching on something I'm extremely worried about. The new fee structure encourages underwriters to engage in riskier lending at a time of outrageously inflated housing prices and high interest rates. And I'm old enough to remember the outcome of George W. Bush's administration pushing policies with similar objectives. It culminated in a housing market collapse in 2008. Back in December of 2008, the New York Times blamed Bush's housing policies for the crash. I'm gonna read a few excerpts from their reporting at the time. They wrote that Bush pushed hard to expand home ownership, especially among minority groups, an initiative that dovetailed with both his ambition to expand Republican appeal and the business interests of some of his biggest donors. He insisted that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac meet ambitious new goals for low-income lending. Concerned that down payments were a barrier, Bush persuaded Congress to spend as much as $200 million a year to help first-time buyers with down payments and closing costs. By the way, Biden isn't even doing that. And he pushed to allow first-time buyers to qualify for government-insured mortgages with no money down. The lenders doled out loans to risky borrowers, packaged up these toxic mortgages into securities that were traded in the stock market, and then proceeded to bet against them because the banks were fully aware of the high likelihood of defaults. Not only did the banks profit from shorting mortgage-backed securities, they also took ownership of foreclosed homes. Now, is Biden setting the stage for a repeat of that mess? Whether wittingly or unwittingly, he's certainly increasing the likelihood. Let's take a look at an example, comparing two mortgages on a $400,000 home with the same 6.5% interest rate in California. These calculations include property taxes, which are actually relatively low in the Golden State. Now, take a look at this graph. The first example, or this screen grab, the first example features a borrower who put 20% down and financed the rest. Because of the larger down payment, this borrower was able to secure a $2,526 monthly payment through a 30-year fixed loan. So now let's compare that with someone who pays a far smaller 5% down payment. If you look at that, their monthly payment is obviously more of a burden because it shoots up more than $500 a month to $3,064. And that's assuming the borrower scored the same interest rate as the person who paid a 20% down payment. And in reality, someone with a lower credit score and smaller down payment would get charged a higher interest rate, meaning that their monthly financial burden would actually be more overwhelming as a result. And however much they didn't contribute toward a down payment would need to be financed. That also benefits banks through interest rates. They would have to pay more in interest as a result of having to finance a larger amount. Now, encouraging lending to riskier borrowers at a time of astronomical home prices and high interest rates increases the chances of another wave of foreclosures. Cash buyers, who tend to be institutional investors, salivate over that type of housing market crash because they get to swoop in and purchase homes at a discount. And while the liberal, pro-Biden, pro-media echo chamber has mostly ignored covering this new rule, I made sure to do the appropriate research and make sure that I got the story right. Right now, the right wing is using this story for their own political purposes, but we shouldn't care about that. What we should care about is how Biden's policies are impacting ordinary people who are already struggling to buy homes. All right, let's get past this paragraph. And look, I don't get any of this either, right? Because it's not about looking at income, it's not about looking at wealth. Biden made a decision to focus on credit scores, again, that does not at all factor income. Biden has done nothing to make the price of housing more affordable. Low supply is a huge reason why homes are expensive. Biden hasn't adequately addressed that at all. And while we haven't built more housing to drive down the costs of homes, Biden also hasn't improved economic conditions like wages that would make home buying easier for Americans. You know, maybe addressing root causes rather than implementing regressive fees is a better approach. Biden hasn't done a damn thing to regulate, or in my opinion, he should ban institutional or foreign investors from snatching up the limited supply of homes on the market, which again also drives up prices. But I don't know, maybe that's the point. He's not only pitting middle class and working class Americans against each other. Considering the burdensome cost of owning a home, he's also setting risky borrowers up for failure. And I don't understand why he wants to do this. Now, I think there's a reason why liberal corporate media has stayed away from this story. It's not exactly politically beneficial to tell people who worked really hard to keep their credit scores up that they will be punished for that in order to subsidize the loans of riskier borrowers. The right wing uses it for political purposes, but I'm sharing the facts with you because this is exactly what mainstream Democrats do whenever there is a crisis having to do with the economy. There's like a little bit of change around the edges. They market the change as if it's going to benefit low-income individuals or minorities who have been locked out of the housing market. But at the end of the day, they don't actually do that at all. Even if the people who stand to benefit from this policy see a slight decrease in the fees that they have to pay for their mortgages are still gonna be super expensive because housing is super expensive. We need to do something about that. And the resentment that this is gonna lead to isn't exactly helpful in the country, especially with the climate that we're currently dealing with, the anger that Americans are facing. This is just more fodder for the destructive and divisive rhetoric that we hear from the right wing. Why would the Biden administration give that to them? You want to make housing affordable, then make housing affordable. Don't punish people who, despite all of the challenges that we're facing in this economy, manage to keep their credit scores up. Just because you got a good credit score doesn't mean you're rich, and I don't think those people should be punished with paying higher fees. We got to take a quick break. When we come back, we've got more news for you, including hospital closures in Pennsylvania thanks to the involvement of private equity firms. That and more coming right up. Ice cream. What's up, everyone? Welcome to our first social break of the day. Lots of comments. Let's start with our Twitch community where Sassy McSassface Dragon says, Anna, I want your dress. You look amazing as always. Thank you, I appreciate it. It is a vintage dress, obviously. Like, I love it. I love vintage dresses, but I usually don't show this much skin, but it was so hot when I was leaving the house. And honestly, I didn't feel like putting a blazer on, so. Agnostic Sister says, so they scam us to achieve good credit and then we're penalized for it? WTF. Yeah. I'm glad you guys are feeling the way I'm feeling about this story because I think this is such an injustice to folks that worked really hard to keep their credit scores up. Again, you don't have to be rich to have a high credit score. I know from personal experience. Pickle Hippie says, that's BS. I busted my hump to get a good credit score. B Finezi says, you know who doesn't pay these effing fees? People that can pay cash for homes. Yeah, that's my theory. I have a feeling that this sets the stage for foreclosures, and those foreclosures allow for private equity or banks to come in and scoop up those homes for pennies on the dollar. So we'll see how that plays out, but that's my prediction. Haven the 704 Dragon says, could my daughter get a birthday shout out? She turns 11 and it would make her smile to hear mom's only news source recognize her. Thank you. You gotta tell me what your daughter's name is, but happy birthday. I wish I was 11. I would make different decisions in life. So I hope she's having a great day. She's having a lot of fun. Melanie 44 says, they don't want people to own homes. They want renters only. Sure does seem like it. Dutch Antifa Dragon resubscribed for 28 months. 28 months supporting this wonderful progressive network. I love it. We love you. Thank you for the support. Chipmunk PDX says, I pay way more in rent than I would if I could get a mortgage. Unfortunately, they don't care. Yeah. If they cared, they would increase the supply of housing, which would drive down costs. But while there's a lot of talk about that, it doesn't seem like they have much of a will to move forward with it. Darb to the left says corporations of any size should not be allowed to own homes. 1000% could not agree more, especially with the housing shortage. Let's get back to the show. Welcome back to the show, everyone. Gonna read a critical comment from Nerd Girl Dragon who says, again, about the last story we covered, taking a right-wing perspective. People who have lower credit scores pay far more in fees and interest across the board. As a progressive, we should be willing to spread the cost to be more fair. I disagree. I do not agree with spreading the cost to individuals who might not be rich at all, who might have done everything right, working class individuals who scrounged up and saved for that larger down payment, who worked hard to ensure that they didn't live outside their means and they paid their bills on time to make sure that they had a high credit score. Why are we gonna punish them? That makes no sense. When we talk about redistributing wealth, we're talking about incredibly wealthy people who skirted taxes, who gamed the system to their advantage, and who are hoarding the wealth for themselves. Why are we not discussing redistributing wealth when it comes to those individuals and instead focusing on a small sliver of individuals in the housing market who might not be rich at all and just for some reason are now being penalized for having higher credit scores? I disagree with that completely. I don't think that's a right-wing talking point. Just because I disagree with what Democrats are doing doesn't mean I'm coming at it from a right-wing perspective, okay? That take, I think, is pretty insane. But Shelby writes in and says, I've worked so hard to fix my credit score, we should punish her. Everybody, who wants to punish Shelby? Shelby sounds terrible. We should slap her with more fees. I'm kidding, Shelby, I'm being sarcastic. It finally hit 779 today, enough to screw me under this plan. I don't want to screw you, Shelby. I don't think that you should be the focus or the target of redistributing resources here. But anyway, with that said, let's move on to another story that is outrageous to say the least, and it has big impacts on local communities across the country. Hospital closures due to private equity greed.
So in one of the area's largest hospitals, Delaware County Memorial shut its doors for good. McCann's took it personally.
A lot of nurses I know, PAs, physicians, it's their life calling. It's really what they wanted to do. And then just to be betrayed like this.
You feel betrayed?
Yeah, absolutely I do.
The collapse of hospitals providing essential care to ailing Americans continues to be a major problem in the United States. Last fall's closure of Delaware County Memorial Hospital had huge consequences for its local community, which once relied on its services and no longer can do so. And much like the fall of other successful companies, private equity is behind the hospital's closure. See, in 2016, a Los Angeles-based company known as Prospect Medical Holdings purchased Delaware County Memorial Hospital through private equity investors and promised to expand care. But the hospital ended up shutting down last November, with Prospect Medical Holdings blaming high labor and supply costs as the main reason for shuttering the facility. But that's not what really happened, and Prospect's claims should not be taken at face value.
In 2018, Prospect Medical's owners took out a $1.12 billion loan and paid themselves a $457 million dividend. Sam Lee, the CEO of Prospect Medical, took home about $90 million.
You found a way to navigate you making money and leaving those people in the lurch. That's what they did. It's criminal. Morally, ethically, it should be legally.
But it is legal. And Prospect Medical then paid off the loan by selling off the land and buildings of most of their hospitals to a Birmingham, Alabama firm called Medical Properties Trust.
Just put simply, they bought the real estate out of Prospect and leased it back to Prospect.
Rob Simone, an analyst at a Connecticut-based investment research firm, says Medical Properties Trust is where private equity investors turn their hospital real estate holdings into cash. The publicly traded company has built a portfolio of nearly 200 US hospitals, often in low-income communities. Prospect Medical must pay $35 million a year in rent, money that comes out of hospital operations, to Medical Properties Trust.
$35 million in rent. Gee, I wonder if that has something to do with the hospital closure. In other words, it's not the high labor costs that shut down the hospital. It was the astronomical rent that needed to be paid after Prospect Medical decided to sell off the hospital's land, only to lease it back later. Of course, executives paid themselves handsomely with the loans they took out. Prospect Medical CEO Sam Lee was no exception. Now, Rhode Island Attorney General Peter Noronha's office confirmed that Prospect Medical CEO, his personal share of the $457 million dividend was $90 million. And this has caused massive problems for the community. And patients in need of emergency medical care are now basically screwed. Veteran paramedic Jim McCanns said the impact of the closure had rippled beyond the nearly 85,000 residents the hospital once served. He said nearby emergency rooms are slammed, and he shared data showing his department's call volume is up about 25% this year because it is covering more territory. His team of 16 medics now has to spend more time taking patients to hospitals farther away. In fact, we do have a particularly horrifying example of what patients in the community are now dealing with.
In January, 2 shooting victims arrived at the closed ER. 911 audio obtained by CBS News revealed they had to be taken by ambulance to Lankenau Medical Center, nearly 5 miles away.
On the way to Lanken.
McCann said nearby ERs are slammed, and his call volume is up about 25% because he is covering more territory. His team of 16 medics now needs to spend more time taking patients to hospitals farther away.
Where does this end up leaving the people of this community?
They're stranded for healthcare. It did hurt them. It's going to continue to hurt them. It's going to cost some of them their lives.
And that's just one example. EMS is taking longer getting to where they have to be, getting to offload their patient, and then longer getting back into their district. So all that is compounding the problem, McCann said. And what's even more damning is how widespread this practice is and just how many hospitals have been acquired through private equity investments. Of the 20 hospitals owned by Prospect Medical, 5 have already closed. Not only does this harm patients, it also harms the workers and medical professionals at these facilities. This spring, it was announced that Prospect Medical Holdings would be laying off 4% of its employees across multiple facilities in Pennsylvania alone. In a statement, the Pennsylvania Association of Staff Nurses and Allied Professionals said that Prospect Medical Holdings, Inc., the California-based for-profit owner of Cruz Health, has for years appeared more concerned with generating profits for its hedge fund owners on the opposite coast than serving the sick and vulnerable in Delaware County and those who care for them. And I totally agree with that statement. They're 100% right. So what happens next? Well, yet another hospital owned by Medical Properties Trust will shut down, but this time the community impacted won't be in Pennsylvania, it'll be in Texas, because this is a nationwide issue. Texas Vista Medical Center in San Antonio will close its doors on May 1st, leaving more than 800 employees without a job and roughly 500,000 people in the surrounding community with just one remaining full-service hospital, totaling just 110 beds. Steward Healthcare purchased Texas Vista 6 years ago with the help of private equity investors, of course. And at the same time, Medical Properties Trust purchased the land and the buildings on the hospital's campus. Steward agreed to pay $5 million in rent annually to the trust. So, I mean, it really is mind-blowing how little this system gives a damn about human lives. But Steward Health claims that rent has nothing to do with this, right? They're blaming patients instead for the closure, patients. Steward said it was closing the hospital due to financial challenges related to the realities of serving a high-needs patient population that is frequently unable to pay for care. Roughly 25% of patients don't pay for healthcare services received at the hospital. And look, I don't want to minimize that, right? The fact that tens of millions of Americans still do not have healthcare coverage is indeed a tragedy, and yet another sign of America's broken institutions. But to blame the failure of these hospitals on the patients while downplaying private equity greed is ridiculous. And what we need isn't just tinkering around the edges, okay? We need federal regulations that prevent these private equity practices nationwide. And if you're wondering, well, what are the lawmakers in Pennsylvania doing, right? Pennsylvania is hit pretty hard by this private equity greed and these hospital closures. So the bill that they've proposed, the state lawmakers in Pennsylvania, would just increase the amount of time that hospitals would need to give notice before a hospital's closure takes place. So it would go from about 90 days to 180 days, which is great. We'll have a little more, little more time to grieve the loss of a hospital closure. Like, how is that gonna change anything? If a hospital is gonna close, you need to have a solution, you need to have a replacement, you have to have a place for these patients to go. just giving people earlier notice about a hospital's closure doesn't exactly fix the problem. But those are the big ideas coming from the state legislature in Pennsylvania, which is just abysmal, shameful, and not adequate in addressing this serious problem. But again, I think this is an issue that needs to be addressed on a federal level. When it comes to essential services, when it comes to something as important as keeping hospitals open, you need to make sure that the profit motive behind these private equity investors doesn't serve as a detriment to that hospital, to these hospitals. Right now they are, and we do not have the proper regulations to mitigate these risks. We just let the greed fly, and we have these hospitals shut down with local communities suffering the consequences. It's absolutely disgusting. All right, wanted to switch gears a little bit and talk about another story having to do with something I mentioned on the show earlier, and it's how indigenous communities are feeling about the West's response to the climate emergency. Indigenous leaders worldwide are now raising the alarm over how the Western world is responding to the climate emergency. And to be honest, their critique here isn't that the West isn't doing enough, although I'm sure they would have that critique. Their concern is how the response to the climate emergency actually puts indigenous communities, not just here in the United States, but across the world, at a significant disadvantage. And they feel that they are not part of the conversation. So during last week's annual UN summit, hundreds of indigenous chiefs, presidents, chairmen, and delegates gathered at the 22nd United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. And I was really happy to see that they addressed the response to the climate emergency. And they expressed concerns over the exploitation of indigenous territories for the resources needed to transition from, let's say, gas-powered vehicles to electric vehicles. So The Guardian reported on this. I'm gonna read some of the relevant excerpts for you. They write that the longtime advocacy group, Cultural Survival, in partnership with other organizations, highlighted how mining for minerals such as nickel, lithium, cobalt, and copper, the resources needed to support products like electric car batteries, are presenting conflicts in tribal communities in the United States and around the world. In fact, while this might not have much to do with indigenous communities, part of the reason why the United States was pushing for that coup in Bolivia is because having a right-wing leader, a right-wing government in charge would open up US business interests to possible lithium mining in the country. Now, luckily, the people of Bolivia stood up and reversed the outcome of that pretty gross coup. But I do worry about some of the geopolitical ramifications of having to mine for the minerals and the lithium necessary for these EV batteries. And by the way, like I said, this isn't just an issue here in the United States, right? So environmental projects that require minerals or wind power are usurping the rights of indigenous people, according to this report, from the American Southwest to the Arctic to the Serengeti in Africa. So Brian Mason, chairman of the Shoshone Paiute tribe in the Duck Valley Indian Reservation in Nevada, said that the 70 or so lithium mining applications targeting the lands there have come without free, prior, or informed consent, what is considered the cornerstone of the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. And he also described the lithium extraction efforts as being on a fast track to supply the Biden administration's net zero strategy to create a domestic supply of EVs. He says, quote, "It's kind of just being rammed down our throats," he said, "at the cost of indigenous peoples once again." The Guardian also reports that Gun-Brit Redder of the Sami Council says that green colonialism, and that's what they're labeling this as, is driving harmful projects like the Fosen onshore wind farm, which was built despite a Supreme Court ruling in Norway in defense of Sami reindeer herding grounds. They just built the wind farm anyway, despite the ruling, which sounds strange. And I feel like there should probably be some enforcement mechanism to ensure that what the courts rule is actually implemented. But Gun-Brit Redder also says this: they look to us to carry the heaviest burden, and it's a disproportionate part of the burden. We need to reduce CO2 emissions globally, and we need to seek alternative energy sources. But we also need to protect the indigenous cultures because we are the guardians of nature, which is part of the solution. And I agree with Gun-Brit Redder on that. They should absolutely be part of the conversation. But taking a step back and looking at the bigger picture, I do feel a little bit of concern about the lack of analysis in regard to the downsides of electric vehicles. I mean, I feel that the way that it's been framed really downplays some of the environmental burdens, also some of the economic burdens for ordinary people who might not have the money to buy some of these expensive vehicles once we make a transition to electric vehicles. And I do worry about what this is doing to communities where the mining takes place or where the wind farms are built. Are the residents of those communities part of the conversation? What's being done to properly compensate them for any of the harm or damage that might be done to their communities? These are difficult questions. Every issue we talk about on the show, including solutions to the climate emergency, are complex. There are gradations. Nothing is good and bad, black and white. There are costs, there are benefits. These are things that we need to weigh. And what I can't stand is the insanely simplistic way these stories get covered in the news. It's either you're a good guy who supports electric vehicles or you're a bad guy who's against them. But there are plenty of good people, including members of these indigenous communities, who see some significant downsides, and I think we should listen to their concerns here. Does it make you someone who wants to minimize climate change or avoid responding to the climate emergency? Just means that we need to find solutions by bringing everyone to the table, especially those who stand to suffer some of the consequences of these new projects. Anyway, we gotta take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk about the insane amount of money you personally spent on defense contractors last year. Ice cream. We've got great comments from our YouTube members. Low Class News became a member, so awesome. We might have a little bit of Low Class News later in the bonus episode for our members. You can become a member at tyt.com/join or click on that join button if you're watching us on YouTube. Matthew the Selt also became a member, has been a member for 5 months. Love you, Anna. I've been on your side throughout the whole ordeal on Twitter or Tweeter. When I say you're my heart, I mean that. Stay you, because you're perfect. You're the sweetest. Thank you, Matthew. And I will stay the way that I am, because that's the only thing I know how to do really well. Arcane says, Anna looking pretty as always. Thank you so much for that. Adam Brock, punishing people whom have been credit responsible is just wrong. I agree with you on that. Zeddy says, Solo Anna rocks. Thank you. Doodoo Bean. And old Duke wants a second term. Yeah, no, not interested. Yeah, the 2024 election is looking bleak, I gotta say. It really is. Ann Crichton says, ding, 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 give Anna a cookie. I don't know which story that was in reference to, but I'll take it. I'll take the cookie. Screet the Misfit says, so many homes are vacant. We could help our people, but we don't. Exactly. There are a ton of vacant homes. I think a lot of them are owned by foreign investors who just needed a place to either park their money or launder their money. And I think that practice should be outlawed as long as we have a housing shortage. But no one's looking at that. Like, isn't it amazing how the only solution we've seen from the Biden administration is just charging some people with good credit scores higher fees? It just doesn't make any sense to me. Mick Mitt says, corporate scam, load it with debt, pay yourself, and punish workers. That was a reference to the private equity scam, and you're absolutely right about that. That's what happened with so many companies. I mean, Toys R Us is another example of private equity coming in, loading the company with debt just so these executives can pay themselves, and then going bankrupt. Nerd Girl Dragon says, I hate that there isn't a way to contact TYT. I used to use Twitter, but I left that hellscape. I'm not really on Twitter either, so even if you were on there, it'd be hard to contact me at this point. I wanna ask Anna about a podcast she had recommended. We can disagree, but I wish I could have. I don't know which podcast you're referring to, but okay. I mean, you could write in now. I'm reading your comments. So let's go to our super chat. Stinky Feet says, I'm trying to buy a house and have an 825 credit score. I think we should punish you, Stinky Feet. You sound like the kind of person that deserves to be punished. Interest rates are already out of control, and now we are stuck with higher fees. Marianne Williamson for president. Caroline Roberts says, didn't the economy crash the last time anyone messed with mortgages? And I have great credit. I am not wealthy. Yeah, this is just a bad idea all around. Let's get back to the show. Welcome back to the show. I'm gonna read a few more comments from our super chat section, and then we'll get to this story about how much we're spending personally on defense contractors. Sir Ruin of House Roundhead writes in and says, I'm an independent and I plan on voting for Democrats for the foreseeable future due to the overturning of Roe v. Wade and mass shootings. First of all, thank you for caring about the overturning of Roe v. Wade, especially as Sir Ruin of House Roundhead, I'm assuming you're a man. It just feels like that terrible stripping of women's reproductive rights it went from being a priority, like something that people were fired up about, and all of a sudden that's kind of taken a backseat, and it's infuriating. But the rest of the comment is, I believe other independents will join me, and Republicans like Trump won't stand a chance. We'll see how it plays out. Baraka E says, credit scores are inherently racially inadequate and not a true measurement of likelihood of default. It's the only measure we've got though, but I hear you. The credit rating system, the credit score system is deeply flawed, and it is insane how easily your credit score can change based on one late payment. So I do agree with you on that. But even though it's not necessarily like a foolproof metric for determining whether or not someone is going to default, it really is the only metric we have because it provides a history of payments. So if you're late on payments, if you have a low credit score as a result of that, lenders take that into account when they make decisions about the fees they charge or the interest rates they charge. Stoned Crab Angie says, I'm very shy and sweet and soft. I'm always drawn to strong personalities because I know that people like Anna can and will stand up to people I'm intimidated by. Thank you for saying that, super sweet. All right, well, I definitely want to stand up to what's happening here, and it has to do with how our resources are being spent on private defense contractors. So let's talk about it. A disturbing new report shows just how much money Americans unwittingly handed over to military contractors through their tax dollars in 2022 alone. So not only did this report show how much money we're spending on defense, it also compared it to how little money we're spending on various social services that would materially improve our lives. So let's get right to it. The Institute for Policy Studies National Priorities Project found that on average, American taxpayers contributed $1,087 to Pentagon contractors, compared with just $270 for K through 12 education. The top military contractor, Lockheed Martin, received $106 from the average taxpayer, while just $6 went to funding renewable energy. Okay, let's pause for a second. I love the way they did this study because it's hard to really personalize giant sums of money that the federal government funnels over to defense, right? We'll talk about the nearly, or at this point, over $800 billion that is allocated for the Pentagon every year. But how does that affect you personally? How does each individual American, or how much does each individual American spend toward these private defense contractors? And on average, it's over $1,000 in just 1 year. So, by the way, that's not the only disturbing finding in this report. The average taxpayer paid $74 for nuclear weapons and just $43 for the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, which I'm sure some of our Republican viewers have no problem with. I have a major problem with us prioritizing nuclear weapons over, bolstering institutions that have to do with decisions about our health. But let me continue. In addition to that, if you paid taxes for 2022, you likely paid $298 for the top 5 military contractors versus just $19 for mental health and substance abuse. Let's not forget the fact that we're still dealing with a drug and overdose epidemic in this country. I mean, close to 100,000 people are now dying every year thanks to drug overdoses. But I mean, God forbid we appropriately fund the services necessary to help those who are struggling with substance abuse. We're not done yet, there's more. So in 2022, taxpayers on average paid $70 for deportations and border patrol and just $19 for refugee assistance. I mean, are you guys really surprised by any of this? I guess I'm not surprised by it, but it's still so incredibly infuriating. And again, when you personalize it like this, when you assign a dollar amount and then compare it to how little we're spending on the services that we so desperately need, it's just so maddening. And finally, give you another example. Last year, the average taxpayer spent $20 for federal prisons, but just $11 for anti-homelessness programs. So in this larger breakdown, you can see that the only thing we gave more tax dollars to, and this is a good thing, is Medicare and health overall at 27.1 cents for every dollar. Okay, so you see this visual, it's kind of divvying up a dollar based on what we're prioritizing in our spending. Pentagon, of course, is massive at 17.8 cents on the dollar. Then you've got interest on our debt, which I'm actually starting to get more and more concerned about. We are spending a pretty significant portion of our resources every year on just servicing the debt that we have. So that's 12.9 cents for every dollar. And it is a problem. We spent 5.4 cents on every dollar for veterans, 2.5 cents for housing and community, so on and so forth. You get the point. What we tend to prioritize is funneling money from the taxpayer to a small number of private military contractors. And those contractors certainly spend quite a bit of money on campaign donations in every election cycle. And as a result of that, they just have more of a voice than ordinary people do. I mean, you do have teachers unions, you do have some folks who engage politically and either do endorsements or fund politicians themselves. But those unions really cannot compete with defense contractors. And I think that we're seeing the outcome of that system in these numbers as we speak. And in 2022, global military spending also hit an all-time high, right? So it's not just the United States. We're seeing a pretty significant increase in military spending worldwide, which is concerning. There just seems to be this push toward war between the United States and China. Really worried about that. There's all sorts of military exercises happening near China with the United States and its allies. The Stockholm International Peace Research Institute's annual report showed a 3.7% overall increase in worldwide military expenditures to $2.24 trillion in 2022, including a 13% rise in Europe, the continent's sharpest increase in 3 decades, and that's of course amid Russia's war on Ukraine. But the United States, of course, beats everybody and has for quite some time now. The United States remained by far the world's biggest military spender, with its $877 in expenditures accounting for 39% of the global total in 2022. The US, which is also the world's biggest arms exporter, China and Russia together accounted for 56% of the global total. And finally, just one more visual to give you guys. Let's take a look at this pie chart, because it shows you the share of the world military expenditure of the 15 countries with the highest spending in 2022. And the largest chunk by far is the United States. It really helps you see how much more money we are spending on our military relative to all these other countries, including, you've got Israel, the second largest is, let's see, China. So the second largest is China, but still China is at 13%, whereas the United States is at 39%. So this is how the system works. Money in politics means that corporate interests have a larger voice, a louder voice than ordinary voters. And so while voting is still important, I don't want to minimize that. If you've got defense contractors throwing millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars, in some cases hundreds of millions of dollars at these elections, at these politicians are gonna listen to them and what they want. And that is part of the reason why there is so much waste in the Pentagon. That is why they have failed not 1, not 2, not 3, but 5 consecutive audits. They don't know how to account for 61% of their assets. It's just a money sucking machine, and it feels like there's nothing we can do about it. But what we could do about it is change the system and demand that we have publicly financed elections, so no corporation, no moneyed interests have a louder voice than ordinary Americans who take part in our democratic process. That does it for the first hour. We're gonna take a quick break. When we come back, John Iadarola will join me for some good news in regard to unionized Amazon drivers. Don't miss it. We'll be right back.
The rest of the news media says you should not fight for positive change. If you do, you're not really a reporter or a journalist, because reporters and journalists don't care what happens. I don't agree. That's not written anywhere. That's not a law. It's just a rule that they invented so that reporters didn't actually challenge the people that are in power. Well, we don't agree with that. We think we should challenge the people in power, that actually makes you a better journalist, not a worse one. Here at the Young Turks, we do our best to bring you the most essential news stories of the day, but we can't cover everything in a 2-hour show. And for the rest, I recommend Ground News, founded by a former NASA scientist Ground News uses a revolutionary system that analyzes where the news is coming from and gives you complete transparency on the potential biases these sources may have. That way you can read between the lines of media bias and break free from the corporate media agenda. In arming you with the context and transparency, you'll have everything you need to think critically about the news and build responsible media literacy for yourself and others. With Ground News, you're not just mindlessly consuming the media, you're part of a movement that is working to hold them accountable and get straight to the facts. Break through the filter bubbles, the propaganda, and the bias, and subscribe to Ground News today.
Here's something you may not know. When you deposit your money in a big bank, it doesn't just sit, safe and secure, in a vault. Instead, your money could end up building oil pipelines, mining for coal, or drilling in the Arctic. So if you're concerned about the planet, give your money something good to do. Make the move to green with Aspiration's fossil fuel-free account and join the thousands each week who are switching to save their dollars and save the planet at the same time.
I got pulled in. They told me, hey, listen, Cenk, we're insiders. We are the establishment. People in Washington tell me that they're concerned about your tone. We think that there's a better role for you, and it's not in 6 o'clock. The problem with the mainstream media is they're desperate to get access. They don't challenge the government. They don't challenge power. We're supposed to challenge the government. That's the role of the media.
Components that corrupt our politicians, I think, also corrupt mainstream media. It's really difficult for cable outlets to talk about things like income inequality, wealth inequality, when the advertisers that are funding their shows are the same corporations that want to ensure that the same system continues. People watch digital media or new media, they get a completely different message. They focus on the issues that matter or resonate more with the constituency. We need to know one thing. Is the corporate media incompetent?
Corporate media, I can't hear you. Establishment press, where are you? I can't hear you. But the media's position I am clear on. Everything is pro-war, so everything is just framed that way. In this case, I mean, war is inevitable, right? I mean, the defense contractors should get a couple more $1 trillion. You ready for the stunning results? Only 6% of people say they have a great deal of confidence in the press. Wakey, wakey, okay? Progressives don't like the media either. You know why? It's the corporate media. Corporate media sounds like a conspiracy. Wait. Who owns you? Multi-billion-dollar corporations, public corporations. You have to fear corporate media because corporations own us. Yeah, that's how it works. We found the perfect person to lead the army, Allison Hartson.
The establishment media works hand in glove with our corporate legislators, and our corporate legislators work hand in glove with the corporation. And we're going to make it so that it's a decentralized force throughout the country so that we can quickly identify stories, quickly identify troll farms, and go in and neutralize the enemy, and then start building responsible media throughout the country and on every platform available.
I got news for you. Later on, I'm gonna put marijuana in my body, and it doesn't matter. Wow, man. Ice cream.
Welcome back to the show. Anna Kasperi and John Adirola with you. How you doing, John?
I'm pretty good.
Awesome.
Glad to be here.
Glad to have you. You enjoying the hot weather?
For the day that we had it, yeah.
It's kind of hot today.
It was just hot enough for just long enough for me, a person who has been complaining about why it won't get hot, to be like, honestly, getting a little bit too hot in LA.
Yeah?
Yeah, I already was wishing for the winter, but that's LA. Generally, the weather perfectly fine. If you're in other parts of the country, you probably don't like seeing us complain about our relatively placid weather, but there are still variations, and I reserve the right to complain about literally every one of them.
I love it. No, complaining is my favorite pastime, so I'm here for it.
Let's do some complaining.
Let's do some complaining. Well, okay, I'm gonna start with something that broke during the show.
Oh no.
That I know you're gonna appreciate.
I don't know what it is.
/ not appreciate at all. It's gonna make you wanna bang your head against the wall. Ron Johnson, Republican senator, during a hearing, argued that climate change is actually beneficial unless you're in a hot region of Africa. Like, the stupidity is devastating. It's so devastating.
Yeah. Yeah, the good thing about Earth, at least, is the only hot places is some areas of Africa. That's it. There's no others.
Jesus.
And it definitely bothers him that millions of people, even in his stupid example, will suffer terribly and many will die. He doesn't care. He doesn't know and he doesn't care.
By the way, a bunch of people have asked me, including, who is this?
How did he get reelected?
I mean, how do any of these people get reelected? Where is that comment? Multiple people asked me if I watched John Oliver. Oh, here we go. ACGC in our super chat says, Anna, did you see John Oliver's show about HOAs? Your thoughts? I haven't.
Oh, you have to.
I know,
it's
I
a
will.
Good episode.
It's just that, like, I would find it interesting if I was already outside of the HOA situation.
Oh, yeah.
But watching it makes, like, I know that watching it is gonna make my blood boil because HOAs are awful.
I learned a lot, actually, that I did not know about them.
They're awful.
Yeah, about the history, it's just fascinating.
Anyway, all right, enough with the whining and complaining because there is some good news we're gonna start the second hour with. So let's do it.
It's not just for you guys, this is for everybody. This movement can be bigger if you tell somebody just not in Palmdale. Can you imagine if we got workers to have the guts and the power that you guys get to stand up to a billionaire? God, that's power. Yeah, let's go. That's right.
We've got some positive labor-related news today. Turns out that an Amazon contractor that employs delivery drivers has voted to unionize with Teamsters. And the great news is that their boss basically not only recognizes the union, but fully supports them on this mission. The only issue is the way Amazon does business means that this isn't going to impact Amazon's business practices. So it's a little more complicated. I'm gonna try to explain it to you guys. So the company is Battle Tested Strategies, or BTS for short. Not BTS as like the Korean band.
There's some similarities, but not a lot.
I'm always afraid to even mention because their fans are
They're great, let's move on.
They're the best fans in the world. I have never seen fans this great. They're the biggest fans, the best fans. Now, the workers at BTS are among the first of Amazon's contract drivers to successfully unionize. Okay, so when I say contract drivers, what I mean is there are third parties that Amazon signs contracts with. They do work on behalf of Amazon, but the workers at the third party are not considered Amazon employees, right? Now, Amazon was not happy at all after the company decided to unionize, after these drivers.
Have they turned against unionization at this late date? Switching it up, flipping the script?
They've been warriors for labor, and all of a sudden they've really changed their tune. It's shocking.
Yeah, it must be about, it's the car thing, I think, that set them off. Sorry.
So let's get to Amazon's meltdown over this. Actually, before we do, let me give you more details about this effort to unionize, the successful effort to unionize. Though BTS workers are not directly employed by Amazon, the company, meaning Amazon, does in fact dictate their working conditions, including their wage floor, their routes, and delivery schedules, okay? So Amazon delivery drivers work pretty grueling 10-hour shifts for far less money than their unionized counterparts over at UPS. So Jonathan Irvin, who is the owner of BTS, claims that due to his contract with Amazon, he can only pay his workers $19.75 per hour, which sounds like a lot. But if you're in some states like, let's say California, where the cost of living is much higher, you'd want to get paid more because the $19 an hour isn't necessarily a living wage depending on where you live. Now, UPS drivers currently start their wages at $19 per hour, but can reach as much as $37 per hour, which, I mean,
are they higher?
I know, for real.
Yeah, no, significantly higher. A lot more feasible if you intend to live in an area like LA, certainly.
Exactly. And to make matters worse for Amazon and how they're reacting to this, their quotes have been pretty brutal. Now, Irvin, who again is the owner of BTS, he stated that when he let his drivers leave their shifts without completing their full delivery routes due to health concerns, Amazon would lose it over that and would threaten to pull their contract with BTS. One BTS driver told the Washington Post that there were several days last summer when he felt like he was gonna pass out on the job because of the hot temperatures, the sweltering heat. BTS, by the way, I should note, is located in the desert in Palmdale, California. So the temperatures do get incredibly hot there. That's why these workers decided, you know what, enough is enough. We want a seat at the table and we want to have a say in our working conditions. So one of the Amazon delivery drivers said this: "We want fair pay and safe jobs, to be able to provide food for our families. We want to know we will make it home to our families at night after delivering Amazon packages in the extreme heat. We organized with the Teamsters to change our working conditions for the better." And last week, the 84 drivers at BTS negotiated a contract with the Teamsters, which BTS voluntarily recognized. So the head of this company, this third party, is not the bad guy. But Amazon does dictate their working conditions. So I'm curious to see how this all plays out.
Yeah, I mean, if I go immediately to my deepest fears, it's a total annihilation of this company pulling all their contracts. I mean, we'll see. I'm sure that is something that the workers attempting to unionize have thought about, and we'll see what happens. Yeah, I think, look, especially when you list what they make, some people who live in areas with much lower cost of living might think, well, they were doing okay. Again, everything is more expensive in LA. The gas is more expensive, the rent is a lot more expensive, but also 10 hours in a truck in incredibly hot weather, that is rough. And it's not even like, it's already, I can't conceive of being full-time doing Uber or something like that. It's very difficult in its own right. But an even harsher schedule in terms of, I mean, we already know with Amazon drivers how rough of a schedule they're kept to. Also, it's a physical job at the same time.
Yes, it is.
Which I think a lot of people can forget. Have you ever gotten a really heavy package and been annoyed about the fact that you need to bring it into your house? Well, you don't have to bring it all the way from the truck or to the truck. So,
and you don't have to do it repeatedly every single day for your livelihood.
Yeah, all day, and God forbid if you do throw out your back or something, you better find a way to complete the shift, or maybe the company goes under. So, yeah, great to see them doing this. Amazon is gonna Amazon. We'll see what happens.
Now, Amazon responded to this successful unionization effort in the way that you would expect them to. So one of the spokespeople, Eileen Hards, said in a statement, quote, "Whether the Teamsters are being intentionally misleading or they just don't understand our business, the narrative they're spreading is false." She said the employees don't work for Amazon and that the company's delivery network is comprised of thousands of contractors that are independently operated and owned. No, Eileen Hards, we knew that. Everyone knew that.
That's your real name.
Okay, everyone knew that. But if Amazon is dictating the working conditions of this company, then Amazon is at fault here. But she continues to say this particular third party had a track record of failing to perform and had been notified of its termination for poor performance well before today's announcement.
Wait, they've already terminated them?
No, listen, I don't take anything an Amazon spokesperson says at face value, right? I think they probably fired or ended the contract with this third party after they unionized.
I mean, either way, it's terrible.
It is terrible.
Yeah, a lot of fun, squirrely language being thrown around there that they're independently operated. Well, I guess to the extent that they still have to abide by all of the restrictions that you put on them. And also fundamentally, why do you contract with thousands of different independent companies? Why is that the path that you take rather than a vertical solution, which Amazon prefers to have in most areas of its business? It's because you are able to pass off a whole bunch of your potential issues to them and make the claims that you're making in that statement that it's not us, we're not the ones doing it. If it's bad conditions, bad pay, it's independent. I mean, they're abiding by our restrictions, but it's independent. It's like a version of the Uber and Lyft thing. It's creating like arm's distance between you and the workers that are working in conditions that are functionally determined by your corporate leadership.
And it's tough because I don't know what the solution is, right? Because there are so many of these delivery driver companies that get contracted to Amazon or various companies, corporations, right? If Amazon has taken this strategy of we'll just contract out rather than have our employees or delivery drivers in-house, you would really need as many of these delivery driver companies to unionize in order to make a difference. Because if it's just a few of these companies, well then Amazon will just decide, oh, you have unionized employees, we're just not gonna do business with you.
Again, assuming, and maybe it makes sense to assume that we put it all on the employees to be the ones that change the situation. In theory, you could have legislation to mandate better working conditions for them. I mean, that's a thing that could exist.
You could, but I mean, John, we live in America. Look, our politicians work for the moneyed interests.
Yeah, and look, obviously there are many companies that contract. There are not many of those companies that are on the size and scale of something like Amazon. And one of the reasons why it's important for you to do stories like this pointing out that they're contracting their workers is because many people would be like, what are you talking about? I see the Amazon truck. They have Amazon on their thing. They have Amazon on the side of no, but they're not actually Amazon. So it's really Amazon getting to have its cake and eat it too, that they get all the benefit of looking like they employ all of these people and have this very professional sort of like sleek idea that all of these people are working for them, but they don't actually. You could put the onus on them in terms of pay and working conditions.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, as with many of the stories that we cover, the onus shouldn't be on ordinary Americans. The onus should be on the individuals who were elected into positions of power to represent our best interests. But they don't represent our best interests because corruption is now so ingrained, so baked into the system. And that corruption comes from moneyed interests like Amazon. But I do agree with you. If we had governmental institutions, if we had a Congress that actually gave a damn about us, if we had even state lawmakers who gave a damn about us, that type of regulation would be far better than just hoping that all these employees across this line of work unionize. That is an incredibly difficult thing to do, and I really do commend the drivers at BTS for joining the Teamsters, for voting to unionize. That is not an easy thing to do, and I commend their boss for being so respectful and accepting of the union contract. But we really do need to change our political system. We need to get the money out. Other than that, I just don't see real governmental solutions to these issues. It sucks. I'm gonna read a fun comment before we go to break.
Let's do that.
Okay, because Thomas Daniel says, don't take this the wrong way, John, but when you talk about climate change, you remind me of that meme of a dog in a house fire that says, this is fine.
Is that a good thing? I can't tell.
I don't think about that meme in that context, but I'm going to moving forward.
Is it that I'm trying to keep it calm despite the insanity of the situation?
You do have a calm demeanor.
I'll take that.
Yeah. All right, we're gonna take a break. When we come back, we have some leaked audio featuring Ted Cruz, Lying Ted, doing what he does best. We'll be back.
God bless you. Shut up, fool. Obrador. Obrador.
Okay, art guy. I love the beautiful artwork you do for us. I wish I could share this with the audience, but you tweeted it out. I'm gonna show it to John. He photoshopped this image of me looking super cool. John,
is that an AI image of me?
Maybe.
My arms are notably bigger in this. Okay,
but the best part is Charlie's included and he's wearing sunglasses.
He looks very cool.
He does look very cool.
You gotta send that to me, by the way.
I will. All right, I want to read a comment from Lars Nilsson. The largest find of rare minerals in Europe was made in Sweden last year. EU wants to speed up the mining process to become less dependent on China, but that would destroy several villages for our indigenous people. Climate transition versus human rights. But like it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be that way. There's a way to do things where you balance the interests of both parties, right?
Yeah.
Or in this case, wanting to do something about climate change while also respecting local communities, right? Have them be part of the conversation, but just speeding up the process and brushing aside the concerns of local communities, I think is a really bad idea. Anyway, let's go to Belrain Firewolf. Smoking and enjoying TYT every single weekday. Awesome. Love it. All right, I'm gonna scroll all the way up, read some comments from our Twitch subs. Chipmunk PDX. Oh, I read that already. Let's go, I'm gonna start from the bottom. Washa says, and being in America, the risk of being shot for walking up to someone's porch when delivering, that is a good point.
That's a good point.
That is a very good point, and it's terrifying. You know,
just having to deal with people and their dogs and everything.
In the early months of the pandemic, after my husband lost his bartending job for obvious reasons, he ended up working as an Amazon delivery driver. And it is a super hard job.
I can only imagine, yeah.
Really difficult.
I had a ton of friends who worked for FedEx when I was at UConn, and it was backbreaking.
Yeah, no. I definitely couldn't do it at all. And I remember like watching him suffer the way that he suffered was so heartbreaking. So when I see Amazon delivery drivers, like if you're having something delivered to you from an Amazon delivery driver, especially if it's a hot day, look out for them. Like if you're home when they drop off the package, or even if you're not home, maybe like leave some frozen water bottles out for them. You know what I'm saying? Like I try to do that as much as I can just to show solidarity and love for the work that they do, because they work really, really hard.
And Christian's in good shape, by the way.
He is in good shape.
So I was making a point about the job.
Desperado, I'm gonna read your comment when we come back from the break.
Obrador. Obrador.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. Anna Kasparian and John Idorola with you. Desperado writes in our Twitch community and says, Anna, and I think in this case John as well, because you do the same thing. I don't know how you do it. Your poise is commendable. If I had to do so many sickening and offensive stories back to back, I would literally need a barf bag or several at the ready.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's, I sometimes don't know how we maintain our sanity.
Comments like that help.
Yeah, they
Talking
do.
to each other
No,
helps.
100%. You guys are incredible. Every once in a while when someone approaches me just to say thank you, it makes me feel like it's all worth it. So thank you for writing in, Desperado. It is people like you that keep us going. And help us stomach people who disgust us, like Ted Cruz, who we're gonna talk about right now.
I think that the country deserves to have a credible assessment of these claims and what the evidence shows. And mechanism to try to force that is denying certification on the 6th.
The voice you just heard was that of lying Ted, Senator Ted Cruz, of course, lying to essentially plot to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election. He was speaking to Fox News's Maria Bartiromo. In fact, Cruz also attempted to put his plan into action, and he was in fact one of the 11 senators who voted to deny the certification of Joe Biden right before the Capitol riots occurred. And that audio recording, by the way, is just a few days prior to January 6th. So in this Washington Post headline, Cruz, cadre of other GOP senators vow not to certify Biden win without probe of baseless voter fraud claims. Look, he knew that he was aiding and abetting the biggest lie, the lie that the election was stolen from Trump, that there was widespread voter fraud. And what blows my mind is just how far he was willing to go for a man who called his father a serial murderer and essentially called his wife ugly. We'll get to that in a minute, but John.
Yeah, I'm sure, again, as always, we can presume that he is sly and wily enough to have told himself, sure, it helps Trump, but it helps me because I'll be able to, I don't know, pass tax cuts for the rich, I don't know. Whatever, he'll be more influential because they'll be in charge, he'll be involved in choosing Supreme Court justices, things like that. I'm sure he's convinced himself that it will be helpful, especially if he is seen to be instrumental in implementing the plan, not just as one of the many Republican senators who would vote for it, but remember, he was one of the main senators actually holding up the certification of the vote. So it doesn't even necessarily matter what the outcome is if that allows him to show to the base that he's their guy. A guy that, like, I think their attachment to is more tenuous than it is for some others on the right. I think he is always desperate to convince them that he's one of their own.
I mean, it certainly shows. It's just incredible to me how this actually did go beyond attempting to pander to the base. Like, Cruz was having these like private conversations with Maria Bartiromo, like trying to put these thoughts into action. In fact, in the next clip, again, this is leaked audio, you're gonna hear Ted Cruz outlining step 2 of his plan to overturn the 2020 presidential election.
Who's deciding who gets inaugurated?
It would be the results of that commission and what they find. And if they found credible evidence of fraud that undermines confidence in the electoral result in any given state, they would report on that.
He admits it.
I like that you guys included Ari Melber in that. So that was on January 2nd, that audio recording, January 2nd, again, just a few days prior to the riots occurring on January 6th. He already knew that the Trump camp had challenged the election results dozens of times before federal judges and lost every single time because they didn't have a shred of evidence. He knew that. He
doesn't believe any of it.
No,
none of them do.
No, he does believe it though. He knew that there was no election fraud. He knew.
No, I mean he doesn't believe that there's election fraud. That's what I'm talking about.
Oh yeah, no, he doesn't believe. Yeah, exactly. But
no, it's just it's a power grab. That's all it is. And honestly, there's so much on a day-to-day basis that you see and experience over the last few years when it comes to politics that really does seem like worlds apart from the way politics used to be. But at least this one, not with the insurrection, that was new, but with their phony commission, the surface level of that is different than anything we've seen before. But remember what happened in 2000? They stole an election then. Like they did it with a different mechanism. They didn't do it through the Senate. They did it through the Supreme Court. But they'd already seen you can do that. And then, I know many of you are too young to even have experienced that time. But if you were there, you know how consequential that was. They stole it. They got their billions in tax cuts. They got their massive wars. They did all the damage that they did. They got their Patriot Act. They got their No Child Left Behind. They got all of that stuff. And none of it ever is taken back in any way. You just do the thing and then you move on. They stole a Supreme Court seat just a few years ago. You just do it and then you move on. They're going to do and move on anything that we allow them to do.
I always thought that if some authoritarian tried to basically become like the dictator of the country. There are so many narcissists and self-interested people on Capitol Hill who see themselves as the future president of the United States that they would prevent it from happening. And certainly someone like Ted Cruz, who has decided to run for president previously, wouldn't aid and abet someone trying to undermine our democratic process, right? Because he would hurt himself in doing that if he does in fact still have aspirations to the White House, for the White House.
Yeah, there's no guardrails, really none on the Democratic side, none on the Republican side. Like, he has every reason in the world to distrust Donald Trump, to personally hate Donald Trump, but that didn't stop him. Didn't stop Tucker Carlson from putting on a dog and pony show every single day as if he didn't hate the guy's guts. They know that it's in their financial interest, it's in their interest in terms of influence and power, and so they do it.
Now I'm gonna fast forward to his reaction to the reporting on this, because he thinks it's no big deal. Who cares? Who cares? You have me on tape conspiring to undermine the 2020 election. He says, this MSNBC clown is breathlessly reporting that I secretly said in a phone call the exact same thing I said on national television the next morning, and then said again on the Senate floor 4 days later. I don't know, John, is it exactly what he said?
I mean, look, I don't know. I'm not gonna go back and read the literal transcript. He did speak on the Senate floor. He did try to challenge the certification, but they also, even the senators who were doing that, were implying that it was like an important safeguard, not a necessary step along the way to produce the plausible deniability that lets them set up some sort of sham investigation that's gonna overinflate 2,000 mules or something and then throw the election to Donald Trump. That is not what he laid out on the floor.
No, that is certainly not what he laid out on the floor. And unfortunately for lying Ted, there was other audio that was leaked, separate audio that was leaked that showed what he actually thought about the possibility of the election being stolen from Donald Trump. Why don't we take a listen to that?
What Donald does when he loses, it can't just be, somebody tweeted this. It's got to be demonstrable facts that can be laid out with evidence, because that's what a court of law is going to look to, not just an allegation, but actual facts.
Not just an allegation, actual facts.
Yeah, the important thing there is that you saw November 7 on that video, and it was January 2nd on the other videos. It's the exact same thing as Kevin McCarthy a couple days after January 6 being like, dear God, we've gone to a place we never should have gone, and it's obviously Donald Trump's fault. And then a few days go by, a couple weeks go by, oh, we're cool with this? And I'm cool with it too. Yeah, in the immediate wake of the election, Ted Cruz knew that there was no evidence, and he thought, like so many people thought, well, Trump will eventually calm down, right? Except he didn't calm down.
Right.
It kept going for a couple of months, and then he thought, okay, I guess we're doing this. It's a political mob mentality.
It totally is. It totally is. And I just have to rewind to the early days of Trump's relationship with Ted Cruz, because you need to remember who Cruz has decided to aid and abet in his attempts to reverse the results of our democratic process. He and Donald Trump didn't get along in the beginning, and I can't imagine ever helping someone as abhorrent, as awful as Trump steal the election and remain in power. So I'm gonna skip ahead to Chris Cuomo probably experiencing the highlight of his career while interviewing Cruz about something that Trump had said to him about his own wife. Let's watch.
Watch guys like you stand by and stroke your beard like a wise man instead of telling the president to get on it when you have power.
How about tell your brother to get on it?
My brother will stand for his own record. Why don't you talk to the president the way you talk to my brother, Ted? You afraid of him? You think he'll smack you down at home?
Oh,
is that
yeah,
what it is?
I'm
like he shut you up in the primary?
Cuomos. You guys
not
are
the
really
Cuomos,
tough.
I'm talking about the president. My brother's not the president. I'm talking about the president, the one who called you a liar, the one who said your wife was ugly. That guy, the guy now who you won't say anything about.
I recognize that you actually wonder why you don't have a lot of Republicans that want to come on your show.
I have more than any other show.
And yell at me and insult.
I'm not yelling at you. I'm raising my.
Oh my God, that was pretty good. He was totally right.
That was the best moment
he
CNN
read
has ever had.
in Ted Cruz, I can say anything. I can remind you of anything that he did, and you know what your mission is. And your mission is to get through this interview without angering Donald Trump. Oh, you can raise your voice at me, and that's fine, and that's fine. He's just reminding you of things that were actually said, buddy. Those things happened. You know, I understand that sometimes you go through days without a person yelling it out at you. And I know sometimes you're able to like lock eyes with your wife and it seems as if that's not what she's thinking about. She'll remember in a few minutes though, don't worry. God, that was a good appearance by Chris Cuomo. It's too bad about all the stuff.
Yeah, definitely too bad about all the stuff. But definitely a highlight in his career that I'll never forget. All right, we got to take a break. When we come back, we'll talk about the scourge of driverless vehicles in a city that's already dealing with a lot, San Francisco. I feel like there should be some more regulations, some regulations when it comes to testing out these driverless vehicles. Maybe. That story and more coming up. Don't miss it.
Obrador.
Agoda GE became a member, and so did Baja Joe. Baja Joe sounds fun.
That sounds fun.
Right?
I bet he parties.
Yeah. Thank you for becoming members. We love you guys, and the support means everything to us. We've got Doughboy75, great handle. How do other countries manage to put people in homes without arbitrary credit scores? Well, a lot of other countries, developed countries, have a more robust system that involves like public housing, affordable housing. But by the way, I shouldn't downplay the housing crisis that other countries are also dealing with. So Australia is dealing with a housing crisis. I was reading about that yesterday. This is a problem that we're seeing all across the globe, maybe with different factors contributing to it. But the US is particularly bad in making sure that, the country takes care of its people, especially when it comes to things like housing. Michael Gonzalez says, I love Anna, solo hour, you're killing it, Anna, thank you, I appreciate it. I should probably read some live read stuff. Let's do that right now, actually. So I was nominated for a Webby, I think?
Emmy.
No, not Emmy. I think it was a Webby. I forgot. I don't know. Was it a Webby or a Streamy? Okay, it's a Webby.
You are gonna need to calm down about this because you're putting too much stress on yourself to win this thing. It's become core to your identity, and I'm worried what's gonna happen if you fall short.
Okay, so TYT as a company has been nominated for Shorty Awards. TYT is nominated in the Shorty Awards for our exceptional work in journalism and honest reporting.
Oh, nice.
The nomination highlights TYT's commitment to informing and inspiring audiences around the world. You can vote for us in the news and media category. Just go to tyt.com/shorties for more information on how you can vote for us. In fact, today is the last day to vote.
It is.
So go to tyt.com/vote. I should probably do it myself.
Yes, you should.
I'm busy. I'm not thinking about awards. But I would appreciate winning one. So yeah, and I was nominated for a Webby. But do you know who the Corn Kid is?
Oh yeah.
It's corn,
Yeah.
a big lump with knobs. It has the juice.
I do remember that.
I can't think of a more beautiful thing. When he tried it with butter, everything changed.
That is true.
Yeah. No,
In most areas of life.
All right, okay, I'm gonna move back to our comments now that I reminded myself of how bad I am at reading live reads. Little Mac McGee says, I'm becoming more and more convinced that EVs are not nearly the magic solution everyone is convinced they are. For one, there just aren't enough minerals in the world to make enough cars. The real answer has got to be public transportation.
Or both, and other things as well.
Yeah,
There's no one solution to anything.
Yeah, I lean more in his direction. Like I do think that there are some flaws with the EV model, but who knows? Maybe they'll advance the technology to kind of mitigate those issues. I don't know. We'll see. Let's get back to the show. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the show. Let's get to our next story. As AI continues to take over in places like San Francisco, other types of artificial intelligence is also hitting the streets and causing all sorts of problems. Let me just restart that because I messed up that lead big time, okay? And I don't need to make the lives of our editors difficult by fixing that for me.
AI would have nailed it.
All right, anyway. Let me just give you guys the story the way that I would give it to you, okay? So there's all sorts of driverless cars being tested out on the streets of San Francisco, and it's been a bit of a disaster, okay? The lack of regulation has caused all sorts of problems. Apparently, the state has allowed for this to happen, and the state and its decision supersedes any local decisions made in San Francisco, so it's been a disaster. I'm gonna show you an example of that disaster in this next video.
And then we just made a right-hand turn and changed lanes into the center lane. It's very natural. So here we come some construction right here, which is very challenging for self-driving cars, and it kind of handled it with really no problem at all. It slowed down a little bit. Now it's changing lanes and just kind of breezed past that construction site there as if it was being driven by a human, quite honestly.
So that looks pretty good, right? That looks like there was no problems there, no issues, no flaws, except that is not the rule. It seems like that's a bit of an exception considering all the other videos that are littering the internet with all sorts of problems. So there are two main companies behind the driverless cars, okay? Let me give you a little bit of context. There's Waymo by Google's parent company Alphabet, and also Cruz by GM Motors. So operating in San Francisco since, I can't even believe this, 2018, the companies have recently expanded for greater public use, including driverless taxis.
Good morning, Sophia. This car is all yours with no one up front. Heading to Steve's Espresso. Please make sure your seatbelt is fastened. For any questions, press the help button to speak with a rider support agent.
Yeah, it looks great. I'm so happy the future is here.
What is your problem with
that? The world is so much better now that, anyway, whatever.
Look, you're gonna do that and you don't have to talk to anybody.
Yeah, I like talking to nobody in my own car that I'm manipulating myself.
I did not know why you chose that. Okay, yes, I understand what you meant with that. You mean driving yourself? Well, but
Yeah.
no, but I mean a taxi, you'd just be sitting there anyway.
We just showed you two consecutive videos, which honestly, I didn't want videos showing this working out
Where it's
well.
working perfectly.
Yeah.
I come out of this
story-
feeling way more comfortable.
Okay, well, let's go to the next video because it doesn't always go so smoothly.
Sir, we cannot move. We're sorry. This car won't let us move. We're not driving. He's trying to. Sir, there's no one there. Sir, I'm sorry.
So those two can't move because they've lost control of the car.
But have they?
I mean, I don't know. If a cop was asking me to move and I couldn't, I'd be freaking out.
I'm
just
questioning the couldn't.
Really?
I'm
You think they're
questioning-
faking it?
For views, who would do that? who would fake something on the TikTok. Look, I don't know. I honestly don't know.
I don't know.
But I also know
I wouldn't
that
mess with a cop.
I believe
in this country.
They might have planted him. It might not be a real one.
John.
I have no idea. No, but my point is that so far as I have known, that it is always able to be overridden by a human driver. It is not just that like, oh, what are you gonna do? Skynet's got it. Like you would be able to reach over and turn it, no?
I mean, I don't know.
I don't know for sure. Maybe it broke.
Maybe all the news reporting here is lying about the issues with driverless cars, including Yahoo News that writes, today, Cruz's public service operates from 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. in neighborhoods on the northwest side of San Francisco. Power users, a higher designation given to public riders who provide regular feedback to Cruz, have an expanded service area at night that can also use the robo-taxis during the day. Eventually, the 24-hour go anywhere service will be available to the public. But Cruz hasn't shared when exactly that'll be. And this comes as both the California, by the way, this story did not end up being what I thought it would be. I kind of want to move on. This is kind of a disaster.
Look, I will say, obviously there are concerns, and not just about that. I mean, we've talked about the Tesla stuff of them like suddenly accelerating or swerving or braking when there's no reason. There are very big concerns about this sort of stuff, the self-driving tech. But I just, and I am more dismayed by the progress than I thought I would be a few years ago. But I also know we are still in a phase where we do not evaluate issues or accidents the same between a person and an AI. Like if an AI caused you to have an accident that killed someone, people would care only about 1,000 times more than an accident that a human does that kills someone. And I know that because humans lead to like 55,000 deaths a year, and it's barely even news, whereas the ones with the AI instantly become a national story. Like the thing about AI is it definitely needs to get better. I think for me, it doesn't have to get impeccable because humans are not.
Okay,
do you drive in LA? Do you see how people drive?
Hold on, but like take this into consideration, John. If you get into an accident with another human being, and that other human being is responsible for the accident in question, then there is someone who is liable and must pay damages.
Yeah, the company should be liable.
Yeah, come on, John. What? Come on, John. Really, do we really think that the companies will be held liable for their driverless cars causing all sorts of accidents and issues?
Yes, I understand that.
I don't believe for a second they'll be held liable.
Sure, that's a perfectly good point. That's not an issue of the technology though, that's an issue of society.
I know, but I don't think society is going to change. I think our regulatory bodies will remain the same. They'll be as corrupt as ever. They'll take the money from the tech companies and the car companies and refuse to do a damn thing. I mean, that's happening right now.
I agree with all that.
So the local like politicians in San Francisco are like, hey, we're expanding like the testing of these cars on our roads and we don't agree with it. But since the state greenlit it, they don't get a say.
Please don't take anything that I'm saying to say that I approve of what California or San Francisco or these individual companies are doing. I'm just saying in general about the technology, my anticipation or my need is not 100% perfect performance at all times.
This is what I know about tech companies. Tech companies have told us all sorts of pretty little lies about how they're gonna democratize everything and how everything's gonna be so much more wonderful under the products that they sell us, under the innovations that they grace our lives with. And all I've seen is tech companies make our lives significantly worse, especially over the last decade.
In a lot of cases.
So do I think driverless cars are gonna make things better? No, I don't. I actually think they're likely gonna make things a lot worse. I think it's gonna lead to mass unemployment. And the government's not gonna do anything to help with that. So yeah, I know I'm a little bit of a downer on it, but like really, that out of all of society's issues, having to drive cars is like the top thing that we needed to find a solution to.
Well, look, devil's advocate, I think there are some people who have to do a 30 minute to 2 hour commute every day. And if this freed up time for them to be able to catch up on a little bit of sleep that they don't get enough, entertain themselves, talk to their family, I would personally love that. Also, again, many people die or are injured, maimed, properties destroyed, fender benders that cost people thousands of dollars because of how obviously terrible at driving most humans are. So there's a huge cost to the status quo.
So you've accepted that the driverless cars are definitely going to be better.
I would say way less cars of any kind would be better.
But
and
there
get
aren't going
people
to be less cars. There's going to be driverless
Well, there
cars.
could be less cars. There could be more bicycles. There could be more motorcycles and motor scooters and public transportation and trains.
There could be. That would require investment.
I'm a progressive. If I'm fighting for anything, it's what could be.
I know, I'm being a downer about this. Let's move on. I wanted to get to this final story before we wrap up the main show. The co-director for Avengers Endgame believes that in the next 2 years, pretty soon AI will generate all the movies that we watch.
That's ridiculous.
So his name is Joe Russo. He doesn't necessarily have, I don't know. Well, what do you think about this, John?
Look, you partially had me at Joe Russo, I guess, because Avengers Endgame is one of my favorite movie-going experiences of my life.
Obviously, it's the best.
But it was good, and it capped off an amazing
watch
cinematic
it, so
ride.
I
of more
actually
than a
don't have an
decade.
opinion about the movie.
You've never seen it?
No, John, I haven't seen it.
Anyway, look, I think that within 2 years, first of all, assuming they get through the writer's strike, I love that they're just glossing that. Also, by the way, amidst a writer's strike, let's not immediately start like waxing poetic about how amazing it's going to be when AI takes over a bunch. No, I don't think that they're going to be churning out all the movies in 2 years. I think that they are going to be incorporated into movies, which we could debate whether that's good or bad. I think the idea of major companies that can and should hire actual writers or people who do the CGI or anything else that AI can take over, instead doing it with AI sucks. But I also think that if independent filmmakers, students and things like that suddenly have a lot more capability to pursue art that they couldn't have before, that could be good. Look, I am much less interested in AI taking over artistic output than I am driving our cars, I suppose. But I also don't think that in 2 years they're gonna be capable of that.
The whole reason why they're developing all this technology is to do away with labor. Like in every facet of American society. That's the whole point.
I think that is definitely why they're doing it.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that has to be the outcome, and it also doesn't mean that has to be what everyone uses it for.
It'll be the outcome.
I think it can make a lot of people, including beleaguered working class people's lives better in some areas. I think, no, you don't think so?
No, I'm curious. I'm waiting for you to elaborate.
Look, I have been since Midjourney was really rolled out, since ChatGPT was rolled out. I've been trying to use these a bunch so that I can, speak, with some knowledge about this sort of thing. I have used AI to make my life a little bit easier in some things.
Did you use it for your goals?
No, not
yet.
We'll get to that. But no, I've produced some recipes. I just hypothetically, we announced a couple days ago or whatever that I'm having a kid. So I thought, you know what? What if like
announced it?
We put up a post on Instagram. It's old news now. Nobody cares. But anyway, as an example, like what if your kid asked you a question that you're not qualified to answer, but you're interested and you want to get their curiosity going? Here's a little good explanation suitable for an 8-year-old of this scientific thing. Or, my kid wants me to read him a book. We've read every book we have like 1,000 times. Just produce, an interesting story about our dog Hilo. And it produces a little like there are some things that I think you could use that are not infringing on workers necessarily that could make people's lives a little bit easier.
Okay, so let's get back to Russo and what he has to say about this, right? So just to give you some context, he was speaking at a panel with Donald Mustard, who's the chief creative officer at Epic Games. That's the game studio behind Fortnite. And so Russo explained during this panel discussion that he believes AI generated content will take over the world of film and television in just a few years. Here's more from him, including his quote. So he says, what you could do with AI is obviously use it to engineer storytelling and change storytelling so you have a constantly evolving story either in a game or in a movie or a TV show. You could walk into your house and save the AI on your streaming platform. Hey, I want a movie starring my photoreal avatar and Marilyn Monroe's photoreal avatar.
I feel like he's going in a particular direction with this.
He really is. I want it to be a rom-com because
I bet.
But Russo,
Focus on the
you're
rom.
not understanding it.
Am I
okay?
right?
No, I don't want to decide. I want to do less of the deciding. Okay? I want the creatives to decide for me. Okay? I don't want to hit up the producers and the director of Billions, which is the show I'm into right now, and be like, yo, I really think that Bobby Axelrod should be the protagonist instead of the antagonist. Like, by the way, I don't even know at this point if he's supposed to be the antagonist.
I have never watched the show. I don't know.
Putting that aside, I'm in the first season,
Put it
so
in
give me a break.
succession terms, anyway.
But do you get what I'm saying? Like, I want to enjoy the creativity of others.
Yeah, no.
And I want it to be actual human beings
I
who
agree.
share their creativity with me. That is what enriches our lives. That's what makes our lives worth living. Having some freaking technology, and then also this second element of it of oh, you get to decide because we live in a country full of narcissists who want to be like the star of every freaking movie.
Well, you don't have to be the star of it.
I'm not interested
You can come
in
up with a creative idea. I like both of those models. Yes,
You're so open-minded and sometimes it's so annoying.
What can I say? Yes, I too want to enjoy the creative output of actual people. Devil's advocate, I like movies with a lot of CGI in them, which is the product of human activity. Well, I liked Endgame, I guess. That is a product of human effort, but it's not like it was drawn by a human hand. Technology can enhance creativity. The idea that a whole movie script or whatever or acted out will be replaced by the product of AI, I don't like that. I do like the idea of being able to dial in, here's a cool thing. Let me come up with a whole new concept for a Married with Children episode and just produces it. That does seem pretty cool.
No.
But I do not want this to edge out actual human creativity, whether in movies or TV, books, art, photography, whatever.
We're such clowns, man. I just love that we're currently in the middle of making humans as irrelevant as possible in society. In every single facet of society, even the parts of society that miraculously we're still able to enjoy, like entertainment, movies.
Well, you could, but you don't even go see Endgame. So are you really taking advantage of this golden age?
That's a good point.
Nerd.
That's a good point. All right. Our bonus episode for our members is gonna be fantastic. We're gonna talk about an incel community that is in shambles after one of its leaders got laid. So you gotta be a member. You gotta be a member to know the details of that story. tyt.com/join to become a member. We're also going to discuss the results of the poll we did on the Riz dating app. I can't wait to talk about that story with John. I want to know what he thinks about it since he is so open-minded toward AI in every facet of life.
Every?
Seems like it.
Maybe.
Seems like it. And maybe if we have time, we can debate and discuss whether it's good or bad for a marriage to sleep in separate rooms.
Okay.
All right, all that and more. tyt.com/join. We'll see you there.
Our audience has given us everything, so we couldn't be more connected. When we first started, people would start giving us directions and say, okay, the mics are too large, move them. Turn them into lav mics. I mean, they were incredible. And then one guy walked in and gave us a really expensive switcher and said, you guys need this.